To afford my paralyzed husband's surgery, I started working part-time at a hotel. But one day, when I walked into a room, I froze at the sight before me. Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Let's tear into today's tale. That morning, I left the apartment a little later than usual. I hadn't eaten breakfast, barely had time to brush my hair, and forgot to take the umbrella I always kept by the door, but none of that mattered. The moment I stepped outside, I paused just for a breath. The air was crisp, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, the spring sunshine broke through the endless clouds that hung over Portland like a wet curtain. It was warm. Not the suffocating warmth of summer, but the kind that wrapped gently around her shoulders, whispering that maybe, just maybe, today wouldn't be so bad. I walked faster, clutching my tote bag, checking the time. Only 2 minutes left before my shift at the pharmacy began. Luckily, it was just a few blocks away, tucked between a bakery and an old hardware store. As I passed the trees lining Hawthorne Boulevard, I noticed tiny green buds breaking through the winter-gray branches. Birds were chirping. Strangers smiled at one another. It felt like the world had finally exhaled. "Good morning. You're glowing today." My coworker Lisa greeted me as I pushed through the door. "Let's see if the customers let me keep that glow," I joked, slipping into my white coat. I headed straight to the front to assist the early rush, the usual parade of elderly regulars stocking up on prescriptions just in case. I didn't mind. There was a rhythm to it, and I liked knowing I was helping people. Then my phone rang. I excused myself and answered quickly, thinking it might be Michael. Instead, a deep male voice greeted me. "Hello, is this Julia Dawson?" "Yes." "Who's calling?" "This is Brian Simmons. I'm Michael Dawson's supervisor." The smile on my face vanished. "What happened?" "There was an accident at the site. Your husband was hurt. He's been taken to Portland General." My heart dropped. I could barely speak. "Is he alive?" "Yes, but you should get there now." I didn't even hang up properly. I turned to Lisa, my hands trembling. "I have to go." "It's Michael. There was an accident." She didn't ask questions. "Go. I'll cover for you." And just like that, the sunshine disappeared. The drive to Portland General felt endless, though I was barely aware of the streets flying past my window. My fingers gripped the steering. Well, so tightly they turned white. I kept replaying the man's words over and over. "Your husband was hurt." Hurt how? Hurt where? Why was he even on a job site? Michael was an architectural designer. He spent his days drafting plans, meeting with clients, arguing over zoning permits, not hauling drywall or climbing scaffolding. None of this made sense. By the time I ran through the automatic glass doors of the ER, my lungs were burning, my legs shaking. At the reception desk, I barely managed to say my husband's name. "Michael Dawson. I think he was brought in just now." The nurse nodded. "He's in surgery. Trauma team took him back about 30 minutes ago." Surgery? I sank onto the nearest chair like the floor had vanished beneath me. My ears buzzed. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear what she said next. Something about signing papers and waiting upstairs. I nodded. I signed. I followed blindly. And then came the silence. That awful, endless hospital silence, the kind that makes the tick of the clock sound like a drum beat. I sat alone in a waiting room with beige walls, plastic chairs, and a vending machine that hummed louder than it should. Every 5 minutes, I checked my phone. Every 10, I stood up to look down the hallway. 2 hours passed, then 3. Eventually, a man in scrubs walked toward me. He looked exhausted, his hair flattened under his surgical cap, his eyes red behind his glasses. "Mrs. Dawson." I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over the chair. "Yes, I'm here." "Is he?" "He made it through surgery." The doctor said, "Your husband suffered a serious spinal injury. A large section of construction material collapsed and struck his lower back." Will he be okay? I asked. Will he walk? The doctor hesitated. I saw it in his eyes before. He spoke. We stabilized him. We relieved the swelling. That part went as well as we could have hoped. But it's too early to know about long-term mobility. There's a chance of paralysis. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there frozen, staring at the man like maybe he'd say something different if I waited long enough. He's resting now. We'll know more when he wakes up. He gave a small practice smile. I nodded somehow, managing to thank him. When he turned and walked away, I finally sat back down and broke. My hands covered my face, and the tears came fast and hot. The sunlit morning felt like a lifetime ago. They let me see him the next morning. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night curled up in one of those awful waiting room chairs. My neck stiff, my back aching, my mind stuck in a loop of worst-case scenarios. But the moment the nurse told me he was awake and moved to recovery, I stood up and followed her without a word. He was in a private room now, clean, white and too quiet. Machines beeped gently in the background. He looked pale, thinner somehow, like the accident had drained something more than blood from him. His eyes fluttered open as I stepped in. "Julia," he said, weakly. "I'm here," I whispered, rushing to his side. I took his hand, cold and heavy in mine, and kissed his forehead. "How do you feel?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Michael didn't respond right away. He looked down at the blanket covering his legs. Then he looked back up at me, his expression clouded with something I couldn't quite read. Shame, fear, maybe both. "I can't feel them," he finally said. "My legs. I can't feel anything below the waist." The words hit like a brick. I held my breath, blinked, and forced my voice to stay calm. "It could be the anesthesia," I said, my thumb brushing his hand. "The doctor said it's too soon to tell. You just had surgery. These things take time." I asked the nurse, he whispered. She wouldn't say much, just kept repeating that the doctor would explain everything later. But I know something's wrong, really wrong. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I couldn't. I leaned closer and said what I needed him to hear, even if I wasn't sure I believed it yet. "We're going to get through this. You're not alone. I'll do whatever it takes to help you walk again, Michael. I promise." He nodded barely, then closed his eyes again. I stepped outside to make the calls. The first one was to Natalie, our daughter. She was still in college, nearly 100 miles away, and I didn't want to panic her, but she needed to know. She cried softly, then offered to come home. "No, sweetheart. You focus on your studies. I've got this," I told her, pretending my voice wasn't shaking. The second call was harder. Agnes. The moment I explained what had happened, her voice sharpened. "I'll be on the next bus. Someone needs to take care of my son." I tried to protest, but it was useless. She was coming. At exactly 7 a.m. the next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, still in my robe, hair damp from a half-finished shower, and there she was, Agnes Dawson, standing tall with a suitcase in one hand and a garment bag in the other, like she was checking in for an extended stay at a hotel. I took the earliest Greyhound," she said without greeting. "He needs me." Before I could say a word, she brushed past me into the apartment, her perfume trailing behind like a warning. She dropped her bags by the hallway closet and began scanning the living room with a disapproving frown, as if sizing up all the ways I'd failed since the last time she visited. "I'll take the guest room," she announced. "Or rather, that couch, since you never thought to have a proper space ready." I bit my tongue. "Can I make you some coffee?" "No need. I brought my own grounds. Yours is too weak." I forced a smile, nodding like this wasn't already unbearable. By mid-morning, I called the pharmacy and requested a few days off. My manager was understanding. Thank God. I didn't tell her the real reason wasn't just Michael's condition, but that I suddenly had to manage a second patient, one who didn't take kindly to silence or boundaries. At the hospital, Agnes transformed. She marched into Michael's room like a general, inspecting her troops, smoothing his blanket, adjusting his floor, scolding the nurses for not answering call buttons fast enough. Within an hour, she had memorized the names of the entire floor staff and barked them like orders. This mattress is too firm. My son has a spinal injury. Not a paper cut, she snapped at one parade. I tried to step in to soften the edges, but it was like chasing a storm with a broom. Every time I spoke, she countered. Every suggestion I made, she rephrased it louder as if it were her idea all along. Michael lay there, silent, eyes bouncing between us like a man watching a tennis match he never wanted to attend. He never intervened. Maybe he didn't have the energy, or maybe he didn't want to choose sides. Agnes, however, had already chosen hers, and it wasn't mine. Watching Agnes command the nurses and reposition Michael's pillow for the third time in 5 minutes, I felt that old, familiar tension crawl back into my chest. The kind that never really left, just buried itself under years of forced smiles and swallowed retorts. It wasn't always like this. Actually, that's not true. It was always like this. From the moment Michael first brought me home to meet her, I knew I wasn't what she wanted. I had dressed carefully, brought a bottle of wine, even baked a pie from scratch because Michael said his mom loved homemade things. She didn't even touch it. She looked me up and down and said, "So you're the one. Small town girl. With big dreams. Is that it?" I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Agnes never bothered with subtlety. Every dinner, every visit she found new ways to remind me I wasn't part of their world. Her tone carried the kind of passive aggression that felt more like a scalpel than a knife. Precise, sharp, always leaving a mark. But the worst moment came one night just before Michael proposed. I couldn't sleep. I got up to grab a glass of water and overheard them in the kitchen. The lights were off, but their voices carried. "She's not the one," Agnes said. "She's not good enough. She's not from our circle. She didn't go to the right schools. She has no real connections. You could do so much better." "She's kind, Mom," Michael replied. "She loves me. She's convenient," Agnes snapped. "That's not the same." I stood frozen behind the hallway wall, glass in hand, heart cracking open. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't because a week later, Michael got down on one knee in our tiny apartment and asked me to marry him. And I said yes because I loved him and I wanted to believe that was enough. Our wedding was small but beautiful. Friends, a few coworkers, and yes, Agnes. She wore gray like she was mourning, sat stiffly during the ceremony, didn't smile once during photos. Then came the toast. She stood, glass in hand, and said, "To Julia, you've managed to land yourself a wonderful man. He's loyal, hardworking, and far more generous than most. And to Michael, well, sweetheart, I always hoped you'd end up with someone extraordinary. But sometimes life gives us surprises." People laughed awkwardly. I held my breath and smiled through it. Because that's what you do when your mother-in-law publicly tells a room full of people that her son settled. The days blurred into each other. I ran back and forth between the hospital and home, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, managing calls from the pharmacy, and trying to keep my voice steady when talking to Natalie so she wouldn't worry. Agnes stayed at the apartment, waiting for updates like some kind of royalty, criticizing the doctors, and pacing the floor like she owned the place. Michael mostly slept. He was on pain meds, groggy and withdrawn. He'd nod when I talked, squeeze my hand now and then, but there was a heaviness in him, a silence that pressed down on both of us. One morning, Dr. Lee pulled me aside. "We've done all we can surgically," he said. "Now it's about rehabilitation, movement, neural stimulation. I'd like to recommend someone, Arthur Blake. He's a private physical therapist, but he's worked miracles in cases like your husband's." He handed me a card. I stared at the name for a long time. "How much does it cost?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be easy. "He's not cheap, but he's effective. I wouldn't suggest him otherwise." That night I brought it up at dinner if you could call microwave soup and silence a meal. "I think we should hire Arthur," I said. "The doctor said he's the best chance we have." Agnes scoffed. "We don't need some. Stranger poking at my son for $000 an hour. I used to be a gymnastics coach, remember? I know how to work with the body. I can help him. With respect. I said carefully. This isn't a sprained ankle or posture correction. It's spinal. Trauma. I gave birth to him, she snapped. I know what his body needs. Michael said nothing. So, I made the decision myself. I called Arthur, booked. The first session, we'd have to dip into savings, our emergency fund, the little nest egg we'd been building for years. But if it meant Michael could walk again, I'd spend every cent. Arthur started coming 3 times a week. He was professional, kind, methodical. He brought equipment, charts, exercises. He pushed Michael, but gently, encouragingly. Agnes loomed in the background during every visit, arms crossed, muttering things like, waste of time, and I told you so under her breath. 2 months passed. Michael still couldn't walk. I was running on fumes. Between the hospital trips, managing the apartment, covering bills, stretching whatever was left in our savings, and keeping up appearances at work, I was crumbling. I'd lost weight without trying. My eyes stung constantly from lack of sleep. My back ached every time I bent down to tie my shoes, and still it was never enough. Agnes had become a permanent fixture in our home, hovering, judging, nitpicking everything I did. You forgot to fold the towels the right way. You overcooked the rice. Your tone was too sharp with the nurse. Every word from her felt like a mosquito bite, small but relentless. And Michael, he barely spoke anymore. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask about Natalie. Didn't notice when I stayed late at the pharmacy just to have a few minutes of silence before coming home. Then one afternoon, while changing the bed sheets, I bent down to tuck the corner of the blanket and noticed something sticking out from under the bed. I reached for it, and my fingers closed around a glass bottle. Whiskey half empty. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. Michael didn't even like whiskey. At least he hadn't before. My hands were shaking when I walked into the living room, holding it out. What is this? I asked. Michael didn't look surprised, just tired. Helps with the pain. There's medication for that. Prescribed. Monitored. It's not enough. I swallowed hard. You're drinking alone, lying about it, hiding it from me. That's not just about pain, Michael. He looked away. I stood there, heart pounding, and for the first time, I let myself say the thing I'd been avoiding. If you keep going down this path, I can't do this anymore. I won't stand by and watch you destroy yourself. I love you, but I won't drown with you. If something doesn't change, maybe we need time apart. There was a long silence. Then Agnes's voice cut through the air like a whip. So that's it. You're giving up, leaving him now when he needs you most. What kind of wife walks out on her husband when he's down? I turned slowly toward her. The kind who's been holding everything together while he gave up, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure if I was angry or just heartbroken. A few days after the whiskey incident, Dr. Lee pulled me aside again. His expression was gentle but firm. The way people look at you when they're about to tell you something you won't want to hear. We've made good progress with therapy, he said. But to truly restore function, Michael may need spinal stabilization surgery. It's not guaranteed to work, but without it, his chances of walking again are slim. I felt my stomach twist. Will insurance cover it? He hesitated. Not entirely. And the specialists involved, the post-op care, the inpatient rehab. It adds up quickly. I just wanted to be honest with you. He gave me a folder with referrals and estimated costs. I thanked him, smiled politely, then went straight to the stairwell and cried until my chest hurt. We didn't have that kind of money. Not anymore. That night, after Michael had gone to bed and Agnes was holed up in the guest room, watching reruns on her tablet, I sat alone at the kitchen table and made a list. Expenses, bills, what was left in our savings. It didn't add up. So I did what I had to do. I started looking for a second job. Not something big, just something quiet, part-time. A few hours in the evenings, maybe weekends. I didn't care what it was. Cleaning, stocking shelves, anything that paid in cash or weekly. Checks. At the pharmacy the next day during my lunch break, a woman rushed in, asking for painkillers. I handed her the bottle, and as she looked up to say thank you, we both froze. "Julia," she said, lowering her sunglasses. "Is that you?" It took me a second. Then I saw it. Behind the sleek blonde hair and designer blazer was in a Harper. We went to high school together. She used to be the quiet girl with freckles and braces. Now she looked like she ran half the city. "Oh my God, I can't believe this," she said. "You still live in Portland?" We talked for a minute before my break ended. She asked about Michael, and I gave her the edited version. Then she surprised me. "I manage a boutique hotel downtown. We've been having turnover with our cleaning staff. It's not glamorous, but the pay is decent and the hours are flexible. Interested?" I nodded before she even finished. "I am. I really am." "Great. Come in tomorrow. I'll show you around." I didn't tell Michael or Agnes. I just packed my sneakers, changed into scrubs after my pharmacy shift, and started working both jobs. Because if no one else was going to save him, I would. It was my 10th straight day without a break. I'd clocked out of the pharmacy at 4:00 p.m., changed in the staff bathroom, grabbed a granola bar, and headed straight to the hotel. My feet ached, my lower back was screaming, and I still had 6 rooms to clean before I could even think about rest. Ina had texted earlier. "You're on 3rd floor detail tonight. 307 through 312. The 3rd floor was always the worst. Business travelers, expensive rooms, twice the mess. But I didn't complain. I needed the hours. Room 310 was near the end of the hall. I knocked twice, waited, then swiped the key card. "Housekeeping," I called out. No answer. I stepped inside, dragging the cart behind me, ready to do the usual, strip the bed, empty trash, check the minibar, but I stopped cold. There, standing near the window, was Michael, my husband, on his feet, not in a wheelchair, not struggling, not holding on to anything, standing, walking, moving with ease. And he wasn't alone. A young woman, blonde, maybe mid-20s, legs like a model and wearing a silk robe, had her arms draped around his shoulders. She was laughing. He was smiling. Their faces were inches apart. Neither of them noticed me right away. I was frozen in the doorway, gripping the handle of the cart like it could hold me upright. For a second, I thought I might be dreaming, hallucinating. Then Michael turned. His smile disappeared. "Julia." My name and his voice snapped me back. I didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just turned around and walked out fast. My breath caught in my throat, my chest tightening with each step. I didn't want him to see me cry. I didn't want to give him that. The elevator took too long. So I ran down the stairs out through the lobby into the street. It was dark now. The air was colder than I remembered. And just like that, the worst night of my life began. I didn't get far, just a block down the street, before I heard him behind me. His voice calling my name, his footsteps growing louder, faster. "Julia, wait. Please wait." I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear what kind of lie he was about to sell me this time. He jogged up beside me, slightly breathless, but very much functional. No cane, no brace, no limp, just a man who had been pretending to be broken. "Please," he said again. "It's not what you think." I stared at him. "Really?" "Because it looks a lot like you walking just fine in a hotel room with another woman wrapped around you." He raised both hands like a cop diffusing a standoff. Okay, I know how it looks, but it wasn't God. It wasn't about her." I laughed. Short, bitter. "She's not the point." I asked. "No, I mean she is, but not like that." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. I needed to know. If you'd still love me. If you'd stay." I was scared, Julia. Scared that if I couldn't walk, you'd leave. I blinked. "Zoit, you let me believe you were paralyzed. You let me take care of you. Work 2 jobs. Give up everything just so you could test me." He flinched. Arthur helped more than we expected. I was walking again weeks ago, but I wasn't ready to tell you. I thought if I told you too soon, maybe you'd walk away. Anyway, I needed to be sure. I shook my head, mouth dry. And the girl? I asked. His eyes dropped. Alyssa. She's the daughter of my old boss. I was trying to get my job back. She offered to speak to her dad on my behalf. That's all. I stared at him in disbelief. That's all. She was practically draped. Over you. She said that's how her father listens. He muttered. I didn't do anything. You didn't have to, I whispered. You already did enough. The hurt wasn't just about the affair, real or not. It was the betrayal of trust, the manipulation. The fact that while I was scrubbing hotel floors to pay for a surgery he no longer needed, he was playing games with my heart and smiling through it. By the time I got home, I was shaking with everything I hadn't said. The argument I thought I would have with Michael about betrayal, about humiliation, about how utterly small he'd made me feel burned just beneath the surface. I walked through the door, ready to scream, but my phone rang before I could even take off my coat. Natalie, I answered immediately. Honey, she was crying. I could hear it in her breath. Mom, she whispered. I didn't know who else to call. My heart clenched. What is it? What's wrong? I'm pregnant, she said, her voice cracking. And I don't want to be. I sank into the edge of the couch, my anger with Michael evaporating like smoke. Oh, sweetheart, I don't know what to do, she said. Max is scared. I'm scared. We're still in school. It's the worst timing. I feel like I ruined everything. I closed my eyes, held the phone tighter. You didn't ruin anything, I said gently. You just need to breathe. We'll figure this out together. I've been thinking about ending it, she admitted. I know that sounds awful, but no, I interrupted softly. It doesn't sound awful. It sounds honest, but don't make that decision alone. Let's talk. Face to face. Can I come see you? She paused. Really? I'll be there. Tomorrow. We'll talk everything through. And listen, Nat, if you decide to keep the baby, I'll help you. You won't be alone. She cried harder this time with relief. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I had spent so long trying to save a man who didn't want saving and completely forgot I already had someone worth fighting for. Someone who needed me, who trusted me, who still believed I was good. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I packed a single suitcase. I left a note on the kitchen table, short, direct, final. I told Michael I was filing for divorce, that I didn't hate him, but I no longer knew who he was, and that I refused to keep living in a home built on lies. I didn't look back. I moved to, weeks later, a quiet city, not too far from Natalie's campus, just enough to give her space, but close enough to be there when she needed me. With the money from the divorce settlement, what little was left after the lawyers and the hospital bills, I bought a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of an aging brick complex. The walls were thin. The plumbing groaned every time I ran hot water. But there was a small balcony that caught the morning sun, and the living room smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Natalie stayed with me for the final months of her pregnancy. We cooked together, folded baby clothes, and talked about everything, her fears, her hopes, the messy pain we both carried. Some nights we cried. Some nights we laughed until our stomachs hurt. And slowly, quietly, something began to heal inside both of us. When the baby finally arrived, it was a rainy afternoon in late March. I held her hand through the contractions, whispered encouragements between each breath, and when the doctor placed that tiny, wriggling boy on her chest, I thought my heart might break from how much love I felt in that moment. She named him Elijah. 2 days later, they were discharged and I brought them home. That morning, I stood by the window, rocking Elijah in my arms. He was warm, soft, impossibly small. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Pale sunlight spilled through the thin curtains, casting a golden haze across the room. Natalie was asleep in the next room, exhausted but peaceful. And me, I was no longer angry, no longer afraid. I didn't carry the weight of Michael's betrayal or Agnes' cruelty anymore. I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was learning to love what I'd found. I looked down at my grandson, and a verse from long ago surfaced in my mind, one I hadn't thought about in years, one I didn't even know I'd remembered. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147 verse 3. I whispered it softly, almost without thinking. And for the first time in a very long while I smiled and truly meant it.